Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
All right, welcome everybody. Today's podcast is sponsored by Creative Pro Week. The Creative Pro Week conference this year is in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's on June 5th through the 9th. And it's an amazing conference for design professionals. And this year also includes some accessibility sessions that are being presented by yours truly, Dax and myself. And if you use code CPNCAD, you will get $100 off any multi-day pass, which is pretty cool. So head on over to creativeproweek.com for more information. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm director of media productions here at Chax Training Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your certification as well, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications. It's singular in the beginning, plural in the end. I always get that wrong. But they're a great organization. We love them over at IAAP, and definitely worth it. So Chad, how you doing, man?
Absolutely. Doing well. Another beautiful day here in Pennsylvania. My wife and I just celebrated our 29th anniversary yesterday. So that was pretty exciting. So we headed down to the beach for a couple of days and just enjoyed the nice weather.
That's awesome. I've been spending all of my free time in my money pit, also known as a koi pond. Found out that all of my rebar is not spaced correctly. So I painstakingly measured all of the tops of the rebar, but didn't measure the bottoms where the concrete is before the concrete was poured. So I'm having to do some creative engineering to get it all squared away, but I'll get there. It's not a big deal. It's a big deal, but I'll find a way. I always do.
How did they know? Like if you poured the concrete and you couldn't see the rebar anymore, how did they even know?
No, it's me. So the blocks have a specific holes in them and you cut them a certain way and they have to fit over the rebar and not hit the center brace that's in the middle of the cinder block. And when you put that down, if you're off an inch, it's a big deal because now that middle brace is going to hit the rebar and everything's got to line up. So I have to do some stuff to cut some of those out and reinforce it and add some more rebar. It'll be fine, but it's just not a drag and drop system. You should just put the blocks on, line them all up, plumb your lines, put it all down, and everything's good to go. But anyway, you'll get there. We'll get there.
Yep.
Hopefully I'll have hands left when I'm done. I did a good job of not burning my hands this time with the Portland cement, but I did forget to put my gloves on a couple times and caught myself on some of that rebar, and it's pretty sharp. So.
Yeah, we don't have a good track record, man. I mean, I smashed my hand with a sledgehammer the other week, and that was a bit of a conundrum.
Yes.
To say the least, because I did it 10 minutes before a training session.
Yes.
And so I said to my wife, I'm like, wrap it up. Yep. We'll go after I'm done. So anyway,
I'll bleed when I'm done.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So awesome, man. Well, so, what do we got going on this week? What are we going to talk about?
Today's a really cool episode. I really loved last week's episode. And even the episode prior to that, the last three have actually been fire. So I'm excited. Today, we're going to talk about the differences between WCAG 2.1 and 2.2. In fact, that the 2.2 is coming out. We're not sure when exactly, but soon.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are like, I don't know, how do I make sure my documents are compliant to 2.2? And so we're going to talk about what those differences are, which really aren't as many as you might think.
Right. And that's, I would say that's pretty typical when we're talking about document accessibility, right? Because even from 2.0 to 2.1, there weren't a huge number of issues that we had to be concerned about, but there were a couple.
Yeah.
And I feel like the same thing with 2.1 to 2.2, That there are a few things for us all to be aware of, but it's not a devastating change, right?
Well,
It's really,
you bring up a good topic, Chad, that, 2.0 to 2.1, we should probably start there. I mean, that makes
yeah, it's a
sense,
good,
right?
yeah,
Because a lot of people are, I don't know, how do I know if, we just heard this from one of our clients, a government client just recently. They're like, well, we need to make sure all of our stuff is 2.1, 2.1. Everything they said was 2.1 compliant. And I'm like, I'm not sure if you understand. There's really nothing, there's not a lot different between 2.0 and 2.1. The first one is reflow, right? 1.4.10 says is reflow, and it's a double A requirement. It says users with low vision who need to make things larger, they'll change their viewpoint, their viewport. Maybe they'll hold their tablet landscape or portrait to make things bigger or smaller. And the idea is that when they make that rotation, you shouldn't lose the order or meaning of your thing. Now, typically, again, this is all web based, but in a PDF, you do have reflow, which we've talked about ad nauseum. I mean, lots of times, which has some issues, right, Chad?
well, yeah, I mean, and to be fair, right? I mean, like Adobe Acrobat does have a reflow command, right? That you can enable and it will effectively reflow the content of your PDF and take it out of its layout and just kind of flow it within your window size. Realistically, and Dax, you could chime in on this, but realistically, in my experience, not many users use Acrobat's reflow command for that purpose.
I've seen I've heard of a few people, and most of the time they're complaining because text starts to get missing. Because what happens with reflow is that if you have white text on a dark background, in normal view, when you go into reflow mode, that white text is now white text on a white background, and therefore the only time you're going to hear it is when you're using assistive technology. If you just want to get rid of the clutter of a document and just read it yourself, you're going to find big gaps where that content is missing. And Adobe knows it's there, and I think they're working on trying to fix it. But the corporate machine works, the wheels turn slowly. So
They really do.
yeah.
But it's important to know too, there are other applications out there that can reflow the content of a PDF file.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, one that I could think of immediately that I actually love
Mm-hmm.
is the liquid mode in Acrobat Mobile.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a phenomenal implementation, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, I mean, I use it personally just because, when you're reading a PDF on your phone, pinching and zooming to
Yep.
try to see all the different areas is exhausting,
Yep.
right? It's just not a great experience. So if it's available, I'll tap the liquid mode and boom, I can now easily browse through. I can see the different content and it's just a great experience. So
Yep.
so yeah, so to your point, 1.4.10 is reflow and WCAG 2.1 said your content needs to be able to be reflowed inside of a PDF file. And to be fair, Dax, I mean, if you've remediated your document appropriately, it will reflow.
Well, now the read order in the document is the flow in which the reflow goes, right? That's one of the caveats to, I don't know, we'd have to look at that and find out for sure. But I thought that when you're in reflow, the order in which it reflows is the read order panel's order and
Do you want
not
me to
the
do you want
tag
me to
string.
test it quick?
You could while we're talking. I'll talk about
Yeah.
the next one.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So so that's, there are only 3 from 2.0, right? Just to reset a bit, guys, we're talking about the differences between WCAG 2.0 and 2.1. Now, we're not going over the AAA things because typically AAA is really very not very many people are worried about AAA, but there are some AAA requirements you probably could look at if you are interested. But 1.4.11 non-text contrast, this was added, and I think this was a fairly major one because it says, look, if you've got things that are not text, that are meaningful, they need to have a 3-to-1 contrast against the background, right? So maps and legends and all of that. So what that says is it says that uh, it says that the parts of the graphic required to understand the content should have the following ratio of 3-to-1 against adjacent colors. So not everything in your infographic, but only the meaningful items. Parts of the graphic required to understand the content need to have a 3-to-1 color contrast from one item to another. So that was a new one for 2.1, which I think is a fairly important one. Chad, what'd you
Agreed.
find out?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Dax. I think it's the reading order that determines the reflow order. I did a quick test and I moved some tags out of their order, and because the reading order was correct, it seemed that the reflow was following the reading order.
And,
So that's another really good point. You know, when we talk about tag order and reading order, and people are like, "Oh, I don't worry about the reading order." That's kind of a significant barrier, right? I mean, if your reading order is all whacked out and somebody uses reflow, that's going to be a very bad experience.
we gotta make sure we coin that term, all whacked out. That's the technical term for FUBAR, right?
Right.
But no, really, there are lots of people out there that say, "Oh, only the tags tree. We don't worry about anything else." And this is a really good case for that, right? And those people that want to wag their finger and say the read order isn't important. Here's an area where it definitely is important. And again, we said that not everybody is using reflow, but here's the thing: if the reading order is the primary reading, if the reading order panel or the reading order is the primary reading order for some screen readers, and it affects reflow for other screen readers or anybody using Acrobat to do reflow, we're starting to get compound situations where it's not just one tiny little thing that, oh, if somebody does it this way, they're going to get a bad experience. It's kind of more than just a few. So I really feel like people who want to say, well, it's the screen reader's fault. Okay, you're going to go tell Adobe that no one should be using a PDF Acrobat to read a PDF in reflow. I mean, that's a pretty big stretch. So I feel like, fix it.
Well,
Just do it.
Dax, I think I need to also kind of change one of the things that I've been saying, right? Because I typically say to people, if your document meets PDF UA compliance, it pretty much meets WCAG.
Right.
But that's somewhat of a falsehood, isn't it?
True.
Because it can be WCAG, it can be PDF UA compliant, but PDF UA does not address reading order.
Right.
And therefore, it can be PDF UA compliant. And if the reading order is not correct, it not only affects the WCAG requirement of being able to be read by all screen readers,
right,
but it also violates reflow.
Right.
So that's really something we should all keep in the back of our heads. I mean, I would say PDF UA is a good start for sure, but if you're trying to meet WCAG, you may have some additional work to do to make sure that you're meeting that requirement.
I kind of think of it like mixing paints, right? When there's two things to creating a picture. If you mix paints, you have to technically mix the right kinds of paints together, use the right thinners, make sure you've got the right tints. All of that helps make the paint paintable, the right paint, the right use, the right drying time, all of that. That's PDF UA. Painting the picture, that's WCAG. It is, am I using good color theory? Did I use rule of thirds? Am I, it's all of the surface treatment.
Yeah. And I think what gets challenging, and we've talked about this before, the fact that PDF UA is a very technical specification. In some ways, it's easier to meet PDF UA because of how technical it is, right? Like, am I using the appropriate headings? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Where WCAG is a little more, how would you describe it? It's like, it's ambiguous for sure. I mean, WCAG can definitely be ambiguous. I mean, sure,
Well,
you
it's
can
about
read the,
experience, I think it's more about user
yeah,
experience and intent rather than technical requirement.
right, right. Because as we've talked about, your document can be 100% technically correct, yet still provide a poor user experience.
Well, Chad, when we go to the w3.org and look up any of the success criteria, there is an actual paragraph called intent for every
Hmm.
one of the success criteria. Like the one for non-text contrast says the intent of this success criterion is to ensure that the active user interface components and meaningful graphics are distinguishable by people with moderately low vision. The requirements and rationale are similar to those for large text in 1.4.3 minimum contrast. So it gives you the idea of why this is what it is. And then, it doesn't tell you technically how to go into Photoshop
No,
and change it. It doesn't tell you how to, it actually does give you an example, several examples at the bottom of different ways to apply it, but it's not giving you the technical thing. So yeah, definitely, it's a balance, right? Everything's a
it
balance.
really is.
Automated testing, user review. We say this over and over again. If you're trying to make sure your document's compliant, you can never guarantee it's compliant by using an automated checker. You
Yeah.
have to have manual review in addition, right?
Hmm.
So
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
And
Well,
that's the only way you're going to know.
yeah. Well, the next one there, Chad, is 1.4.12 text spacing. Now, this is a new one for 2.1, but it's the one I think is almost always misquoted because the people misinterpret this. It says the content implementation using markup language that supports the following style. It says in content implementation using markup language that supports the following textile properties. No loss of content or functionality occurs by setting all of the following and by changing no other style property. And then it lists line height, spacing, letter spacing, and word spacing. And people always think that it's telling you this is what your letter should be, that it should be that your line height should be 1.5 times, that your spacing should be 2 times the font size, that your word spacing should be 0.16. Those are just saying if someone were to change their own user settings to those things, does your content hold up? Does it stay solid? Does it not break apart? And I think that a lot of people think that it's the minimum font size and all of that for accessibility.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean that's I feel for the web developers. I really do because, you know, for websites, the user can control how that web page is rendered,
Right.
right? We don't have as much of that in PDF,
Right.
right? For the most part, I mean, there actually are some settings in Acrobat you can adjust that will change how items are displayed in your copy of Acrobat. But it's I would say it's definitely more prominent on the web, right?
Could you
Like,
imagine if they implemented liquid mode on the desktop PDF?
oh, I mean, I think I still want them to. I would love it if they did. Like I said, we've talked about this before. I mean, I think I just want them to use my tags instead of them reinterpreting them, in
Right.
my document.
Well, and in text
Cool.
spacing, if people scroll down, if you scroll down to where it says applicability, there's an actual paragraph on applicability. The last sentence says, currently, this success criteria does not apply to PDF as it is not implemented using markup language. Now,
Right.
that's not really true. It is using markup language. It's just not markup language you can access. The markup language that's encoded into the PDF is behind a bunch of brick walls that the average user can't get to unless you've got the SDK or you're like us and you're deep diving into actual tags and properties. So this is the one. And so those are the three: reflow, non-text contrast, and text spacing. So if you're like, oh my gosh, we had to move all our documents from 2.0 to 2.1, those are the only three rules you have to worry about.
Yep. Yep.
Now, what about 2.2, Chad?
Yeah. So 2.2, there's actually 9 new guidelines in WCAG 2.2. 4 of the 8 don't really apply to PDFs. There's a lot of the guidance that's focus based,
Right.
right? You know, that like they're all relative to how items are how objects are focused upon, and that's really all web based.
Right.
But
2.4.11, 12, 13. Those are
yeah,
all about the focus ring or the focus indicator inside a web page. In a PDF, we do have a focus ring, but you and I, as developers, we don't have the ability to force a user client to a specific border highlight width or color, right?
right, right. And then there's one that's regarding dragging movements.
Right.
And again, that's not something that we can really do in a PDF file.
You could do
Now,
some custom JavaScript, but who's doing that? And you
I
shouldn't
know.
be. If you are,
Yeah.
shame on you.
Yeah, if you're doing custom JavaScript and you still want it to be accessible,
Yeah,
that's gonna get pretty tricky. But
right.
the ones that do apply,
2.5.8 is pointer target spacing. Right, Chad?
yep. So this one says that the size of the target for pointer inputs is at least 44 pixels.
Right.
Okay. And then it goes into some exceptions. It says, except where in large, a mechanism is available to change the CSS pixel size of each target, or its spacing. But fundamentally, what it's saying is that, you know, they don't want you creating a hit area that is like 10 pixels by 10 pixels,
Right.
because it's really hard for somebody with cognitive disabilities, with, you know, even low vision, and certainly non-sighted users. They would all have trouble, you know, with some of those elements.
Well,
So
so non-sighted users would be able to
yeah,
tab from one object to another, but people with tremors, with MS, with any kind of mobility issues, that's going to be they're going to be most impacted by the success criteria, because the ability for a person who's got a shaky mouse to actually click on the right thing. I mean, I get this all the time where the text itself, the actual stroke, is clickable, but the area outside the
oh,
text is not. And it frustrates me so bad when I'm in a web page and I'm like trying to click on the little line that is the T or in the, in the word. And that's just so frustrating. So yeah, this is definitely one of those, I think of like a flyer with a bunch of logos at the bottom, right? And all these logos, maybe it was a poster and now you've shrunk it down to a flyer and you want to hand this out, but you still want all these logos hyperlinked. Well, if they were one size when it's, 4 foot by 3 foot, maybe it's too small now that it's an 8.5 by 11. And being able to click on those, you've got to make sure that you're 44 pixels, which is, we were doing some calculations offline here. That's 9 millimeters, or how many points was that, Chad? It was
33 points. I guess we don't really have the inch conversion, but you know,
right.
we can certainly easily do that. But yeah, basically, and so, you know, in a PDF file, everybody. So when we're talking about doing this, you know, the way you would create a hit area in a PDF file would be via a form element, right? And more form element, right? So a button when you're doing forms, or a hyperlink,
Right.
when you, if you want to make like a logo, a clickable hyperlink, right? So one of the ways you could see the size, right? Like, so in the case of a button, right, that's a form element. If you create a button in Adobe Acrobat, you can go to the position tab and it will show you the size of that object, right? And you could change the units in Adobe Acrobat. You can change it to inches, millimeters, points, pixels. Ironically, pixels is not an option,
And that's for
right?
that's for
So
buttons, right?
That's for buttons. Well, it's actually for any form element, but if we're talking about a hit area, it would likely be a button, right?
Well, I think a hyperlink
Um,
would be more. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've put a button inside a PDF in a couple years. But we do definitely add hyperlinks to our images in a document, right? So how would we change that with like a QR code or a logo or something like that?
yeah. So when you make a hyperlink, we do not have any properties in the link properties dialog. So you would probably, I would say you'd probably have to do a little bit of trickery. Um,
Give enough white space around your image when you, like, if you're creating logos, you want to make sure that you've got at least, the millimeters to inches is 0.35 inches, right? So if you add a quarter inch of space around your image, right, that's going to be enough for either side. Now you've got a half inch. That's well more than enough. So
right.
whatever 0.35 is divided by 2, um is going to be your measurement, which is 1.75, right? That's an eighth
Yeah,
of an inch. So if you give yourself an eighth of an inch white space around your images at 100%, then you're going to be plenty fine for your, meeting this criteria, right? And I
for
know
sure.
people are probably saying, well, but can't they zoom in? Sure. And we're talking about 100% here, just at normal viewing. Now, if I'm trying to click on a bunch of different things on a page, zooming in now is going to make me scroll left and right. So, it's compound things. And again, it's how much accessibility are you trying to account for in your documents? But this we're applying a a principle that is mainly for web to a PDF, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is
Yep.
really about buttons and targets in a web page, typically a radio button or a checkbox or a form button, right? Just like you said. In a PDF, probably a lot less likely. Well, we can't really change well, we can change radio button sizes, so I guess we are talking about form objects, right? I mean,
Oh yeah,
like you said earlier, I kind of dismissed what you had said about the buttons, but really you're right. I mean, a checkbox or radio button needs to be at least 44 pixels in size to be sorry, 44 44 pixels,
44 pixels.
right,
Yeah.
in size. So
And that's interesting because a 44 pixel radio button is pretty big.
yeah.
It's very big. I just did one. I'm doing one as we're talking here. I mean, that's a giant radio button. So I think we need to, I don't know, Dax. I think we may need some clarity on that.
Oh, you know what though, Chad? Here's the thing. We're misinterpreting this a bit.
Okay.
That the spacing between one item and another, right? It says pointer target spacing. The size
That's a
of the
really good point.
target for the pointer. No, no, no. It says 2.5.8 pointer target spacing. The size of the target for the pointer input is at least 44 pixels. So
Hmm.
it is saying specifically the radio button. Um uh
I think we should dive into that one a little bit
yeah,
more
let's do
because
some deeper dive.
like I said, if you create a 44 pixel radio button, it's a nickel. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's like a nickel on your page, and I'm like, ooh, that's pretty big.
Well,
So we'll
actually,
have
you
to
know
come
what
back to
though,
that.
Chad, the very next thing, the exceptions say enlarge, right? For one of the exceptions is enlarge. A mechanism is available to change the CSX pixel size of each target or its spacing so that there is an area with a width and height of at least 44 pixels that includes it and no other targets. So in other words, if you can zoom into the PDF, you
Okay.
solve it. So I
Okay.
think we put this one to bed, that
Yeah. Yeah.
that you don't have to actually make it 44 pixels. You just, PDF allows you to zoom, so therefore, you get that. But you need the spacing in between each item so that they can actually click on them, right?
Got it.
So,
Got it. And
yeah.
do they specify the spacing itself? Is the
Um,
spacing supposed to be 44 pixels as well?
it says mechanisms able to change the system or its spacing so there is an area with a width and height of at least 44 pixels that includes
Okay.
it and no other target. So nothing overlaps. So no logos are overlapping each other, which actually is interesting because if you think about multi-line hyperlinks where the
Mhm.
hitbox is a rectangle, and if you have one hyperlink on one line and then the beginning of another hyperlink at the end of that same line, and then on the bottom, you now have two overlapping hitboxes.
Yeah.
So that would be
Yeah.
a violation of this criteria. So interesting.
Although we talked about this, Dax, that in PDF2 we're supposed to be getting geometric hitboxes.
Sure.
So that would kind of, alleviate that, that problem. But
Right.
it's interesting. It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Well, and then the next one, right? Chad, you want to talk about this next one?
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is actually a really great piece of guidance because I personally have experienced this myself. So guideline 3.2.6, consistent findable help,
Right.
right? That contact info is consistently in the footer. So if I'm, on a web page or I'm in a PDF file, there's a consistent spot where I can click to email somebody, to contact somebody, and get assistance if need be.
So this is
Um,
a level A requirement. And it says if a web page contains any of the following help mechanisms, those mechanisms are repeated on multiple web pages within a set of web pages, and they occur in the same order relative to the other page content unless change is initiated by the user. And the types of information they cite are human contact details, human contact mechanisms, so like the contact button, self-help options, and automated contact mechanisms. So the idea behind this is that you can consistently know where to look to get that information. And if you've got the your contact information in the footer on one page and in the sidebar on another page and maybe in the header on another, I mean, having a consistent user experience is really important. It's a foundational principle of good UI UX. And if you're not doing that, I would challenge you to go take a look at your templates and change that. Now for a PDF, we are mostly talking about header footer information. One of the things that bothers me is in a PowerPoint slide deck, people will put the title of the slide at the top of some slides and at the bottom of other slides, and it moves around. And you're like, I want to be able to know that every time I look at a new slide, my eyes know where to go. There's a hierarchy to follow. This is in that same kind of vein. If you're trying to look for that help, can I get to it specifically? Now, we are extrapolating for a PDF because there is, it says this, the intent, it is not the intent of this success criteria to require authors to provide help. The criteria only is required that when one of the following are listed and available across multiple pages, that it can be in a consistent location. It does not require authors to provide help information on PDFs or other static documents that may be available for viewing or download. PDFs and other static documents are not considered part of a set of web pages. So really they are kind of giving you the out here that if you don't want to follow this, you don't have to. But I would suggest that you do. Be consistent, right?
yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm sure as we were saying this, people were immediately like, but wait a minute, we artifact the footer on every page.
Right.
Like that's standard practice. And what I would say is like probably a good experience would be to tag the one on the last page.
Right.
Right. I would love it, Dax, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this to some extent before, but I would love to have more semantic markup elements in a PDF.
Yeah.
And it would be great if we had a footer element.
Yeah. a region that allows them to go to that region and say,
Yeah.
just, I want the
Yeah.
footer to be accessible when I want it. Give me
Yeah.
the way to navigate to a footer and a header, right? Imagine all those
Sure.
people that are out there putting menus inside their headers and then trying
Yep.
to fix the untagged annotations. If we gave them a region that someone could skip to main content, then that would be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah. I mean,
someday.
I would really love that because I mean, a screen reader, they could add a shortcut that says go to footer,
Yep,
and boom, right there, you have that information you're looking for. So, you
absolutely.
know, again, like accessibility is always about adding features that, although may not be accessible today, could potentially be accessible in the future,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And again, we've said this before. I mean, to a screen reader user, the concept of a page is irrelevant. Their content is read linearly from beginning to end,
sure.
right? And even though a screen reader does let them know when they get to a new page, it's very subtle and not very in their face, so to speak.
Right.
But well, as we're talking about like the header and the footer, I mean, uh, it would be great to like just go to that end of the document and then
Yep.
quickly be able to access that contact info.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. And the last one is guideline 3.3.7, redundant entry. So this is for all of you who deal with fillable forms.
Hmm.
And Chad, you and I, for a client, literally just did 4,000 of these forms, right?
Yeah.
Our good friends over at CSIU, we were able to help them take their forms. They had multi-language forms. First page was in English, second page was in one of 13 different languages. And so what they wanted was the ability to add the person's name or the form fields in on page one and have it populate the rest of the document. And they were actually ahead of the game because they're following the success criteria for WCAG 2.2, which is redundant entry, that says information previously entered or provided to the user that is required to be entered again in the same process is either auto-populated or available for the user to select.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, it also is just really good practice, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many forms that I've done where, and again, it's redundant, but they ask the person to enter their name again on every
Yeah.
page, right? Well, the beauty of, web forms or PDF forms is that I can make it so that when they enter their name once on the first page, it automatically populates their name everywhere else it needs to be in that form,
Well,
which is very helpful.
and Acrobat does some of this because if you use Acrobat Pro, I don't know about Reader, but Pro remembers my last few entries when I get to form fields. And so if it's asking me for my name, it'll actually show me a drop down of, hey, here's the last 5 things you entered for a field with the word name in it. And it works okay, but it's just like the Google auto populate forms.
Right.
Sometimes it puts the wrong thing in the wrong place and it's like, now I got to go back and fix that. This is more of a, hey, we purposely designed this form to auto populate the things. Address is one of the ones I hate having to retype in, but there are a couple of exceptions. One, it says one where re-entering information is essential. The first one the thing that comes right to mind is password, right? I mean, if I need to enter my password to validate something, having to enter it again obviously is important, and that would be in a web page. The other thing might be your social security number or a phone number or a contact email where they want to make sure you have no typos in something, so they have you enter it twice. And then the information is required to ensure security of the content, like we said, just about passwords, and provide entered information is no longer valid. Meaning, if I type in an address and it's wrong, I need to type it in again, or maybe something has changed and I need to type it in again. So, those are a few of the caveats. So that's kind of it, Chad. I mean, really, we're talking about visible focus, pointer target spacing, consistent findable help, and redundant entry. Those 4 things are the things that you need to be aware of for 2.2 that you might not be doing in 2.1 currently.
Yeah. But I think they're all legitimate guidance, right?
Yeah.
They're probably a lot of the things that we should probably have been doing anyway, but they're also not devastating, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you have to change your workflow, right?
Nope.
I mean, they're really minor adjustments, and you will be 2.2 compliant.
Right. And I said visible focus. Visible focus is not one of the ones that you can control inside a PDF. So it really is just 3: the pointer size,
Right.
findable help, and redundant entry. I just was reading my notes and I'm going, wait a minute.
I know.
Visible focus is not one of those. We just ruled that out. I said it like 3 different times. So
Yeah.
visible focus, right? The one thing I will say about visible focus though is do not turn off shading for your form fields. Leave that on. That would be a visible cue for knowing where your form fields are for a person with cognitive disability, or actually just accessibility in general.
You mean highlight shading?
Yes.
Like when it's highlighted. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely that's something to consider. So those 3 things, right? And if you do those 3 things, you're going to be good to go. And, which really means that if you go from 2.0 to 2.2, there's a total of 6 things that you really need to know. So
for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Chad, I'm looking forward to going to Access U coming up here shortly, right? I mean, we're going to be
that's coming up in like a week, right?
Yeah.
Is it a week?
It is it is
2 weeks.
Yeah. And we're going to be in Austin, Texas, May 9th through the 12th at the John Slayton Access U conference. You and I are both speaking, doing a pre-conference lab, and I'm going to be monitoring a panel, and you've got a couple sessions. So if you guys aren't already signed up for this, or you are in the Phoenix, Austin area, swing by, come attend this conference. We'd love to see you. And then after that, it's what, Chad? What are we doing after Access U?
After that is Creative Pro Week, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's June. We mentioned that in our intro here. That's June 5th through 9th.
Right.
So that's the next one. After that, we have Enabling coming up.
Yep.
Right. So that's in October, I believe. But we'll give you more details about that closer to the time. But let's get through the summer first, right? Let's get through, one thing at a time. But anyway, listen, we're really glad you all joined us for today's podcast. We hope you found this valuable. We'd love to hear your comments, on your platform of choice, or shoot us a LinkedIn message, email us, whatever you prefer. So once again, we want to thank Creative Pro. I can't hear you.
Oh, we're live. We're live on. There's no retake, right?
I know. I was getting ready to say, wait, I'm going to do that over, and I'm like, I can't because I'm on video. So
that's okay.
Anyway,
I'll cut. Maybe I'll cut that out. Maybe I won't.
Don't even worry about it. Yeah. Anyway, everybody, thank you for listening in today. Once again, we want to thank Creative Pro Week for being our sponsor. Again, Creative Pro Week is in Phoenix, Arizona this year from June 5th through the 9th. And we hope to see you there as well in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. So my name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Another one in the books.